Women who faced sexual violence during the 10 years of the Maoist armed conflict continued to suffer. On June 19, the globe celebrates the International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict. With the acknowledgement of conflict-related sexual violence under international humanitarian law, international criminal law, and international human rights law, some progress has been achieved on this front. The right to equal access to justice has also been recognized by the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Despite the fact that these laws recognize sexual assault as a human rights violation in both conflict and peacetime, nations that have experienced armed conflict, such as Nepal, have made no substantial measures to address the many needs of women who have experienced sexual violence. The adoption of UN Security Council Resolutions 1325 and 1820 established a political framework and roadmap for women's participation in the peacemaking process and the resolution of incidents of sexual violence committed during armed conflict. Nepal created its first national action plan in 2011 in response to UN Resolutions 1325 and 1820, but it has yet to make a meaningful impact on the lives of women who have experienced sexual violence. Continue to be in pain. The Nepalese Peace Pact has been in place for over 15 years. Women who were sexually abused during the Maoist armed war's 10 years of conflict continued to suffer. The Nepali peace process has long ignored the specific needs of these women. They've also been ignored in favor of dealing with large unforeseeable occurrences like the 2015 earthquake and now COVID-19. During the armed conflict and big unforeseeable events, however, women were disproportionately affected. They were subjected to terrible violence during the battle, and they suffered even more during the earthquake and the coronavirus outbreak. Despite the fact that the peace treaty was signed 15 years ago, the government has yet to recognize sexual violence victims as conflict victims or pay any peace dividends in exchange for their contributions to improving the system. This is a clear evidence of these women's enslavement, humiliation, and marginalization. Women who experienced sexual violence during the Maoist insurgency are still living with memories and flashbacks of the traumatic occurrences they suffered due to the massive magnitude of political brutality and power control. They have not been able to ventilate their multiple traumas, which are still making them psychologically and physically weak, due to a lack of safe locations. Many of them are in a life or death scenario as a result of a lack of funds for regular therapy and medicine, especially during COVID-19. Many parents have also reduced their spending on normal medications in order to purchase mobile phones and data for their children so that they can participate in online lessons. Furthermore, the women who were subjected to heinous acts of abuse were largely from impoverished backgrounds. On the battlefield, these women were exploited as human shields and subjected to horrific torture and violence. Many of those involved in the terrible episode were young and able to support themselves by doing any kind of employment that came their way at the time. However, because of the horrible violence they experienced throughout the fight, they are now aging and their bodies are no longer capable of doing any strenuous job. Their inability to sit in one position for more than 2 hours demonstrates the consequences of the severe brutality and torture inflicted on their bodies. When they undertake heavy work, their backs bulge as well. Our administration and leaders do not have time to reflect on the ramifications of the violence against women that occurred during the armed conflict. They can change any policy they want for their own gain by going beyond the Constitution, causing the country to devolve into chaos as a result of their odious power struggles. But the irony is that they can't come up with a strategy or take action to help women who have been victims of sexual abuse, despite the fact that they have every right to long-term government assistance. So says the accord. Both sides reiterate their commitment to the respect and protection of human rights and international humanitarian law, and accept that nobody should be discriminated against on the basis of color, gender, language, religion, age, race, national and social origin, wealth, disability, birth and other status, thought or belief, according to Article 7.1.1 of the Comprehensive Peace Accord. Women who were victims of sexual violence during the armed conflict, on the other hand, continue to experience discrimination from the state, as well as from their families and communities. Many of them have also been evicted from their homes when their cases were brought to the attention of their family members, who did not comprehend that the incident was not their fault. Both sides express the commitment that fair investigation and legal action would be taken out against anyone guilty for obstructing the exercise of the rights indicated in the letter of agreement, and guarantee not to foster impunity, says Article 7.1.3. They must also ensure the right to relief for the families of conflict and torture victims, as well as the disappeared. However, women who have been victims of sexual abuse have never been included in this strategy or plan. This official omission contributes to the subjugation of these women by perpetuating the ongoing systemic violence. In this situation, it is critical to examine the patterns and trends of such violence and identify the perpetrators so that they can be punished and the women can be socially and culturally established. Otherwise, history will continue to hold these warlords and their fanatical followers accountable for every injustice suffered by women who were sexually assaulted during the armed conflict.